origin of heartbreak. And we can see a broken arm. We know what to do with a broken arm. Oh, all right, you cry for help, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they wrap it up, they tell you 6 weeks. All right, great. This is a physical, tangible injury. But I think so many people in this world, especially those who struggle with addiction and trauma and mental health issues, you can't see it, which makes it even more pervasive.
Welcome to the AfterMeth podcast. This is your host, Dr. Dallas Bragg, a former crystal meth addict, now sobriety coach. Join me on my mission to increase awareness around the epidemic of crystal meth among the gay male population and create a repository of resources for current and past addicts as well as and especially for their loved ones. This is the AfterMeth. Trigger warning, this podcast will contain discussions pertaining to drug and alcohol misuse. If you feel triggered to use or relapse, please call SAMHSA's national hotline at 1-800-662-HELP. Also, if you are new in your sobriety journey and you feel like you could be triggered by discussions around drug, alcohol, and sex misuse, please do not listen to this podcast. All right, now on with the show. Okay, welcome back to the AfterMeth podcast. Today I am interviewing a new buddy of mine from all the way across the country, Melissa McCracken, which I love saying your name, Melissa McCracken. I don't know why.
It's quite a handle.
It just rolls off the tongue.
Mhm, mhm.
But I met Melissa where I meet most other people, TikTok. You know, TikTok. Who knew? TikTok is bringing the world together. Um,
Yeah, it sure is. And a much needed togetherness too.
Right, that's right. You know, someone reached out to me the other day and he's like, I have a friend who is, he needs a lot of help. I want to protect his privacy. And so he wouldn't give me, he said, I can't give you his name. And I was like, okay, you have a friend who needs help. And I said, so maybe you could just suggest my TikTok page. And he went
Mhm.
off the handle on me.
Oh,
TikTok. You know, but
I,
I guess a lot of people think TikTok is just dancing, doing dances and
yeah.
food preparation and, life hacks or whatever. And it is a lot of that, right?
Mhm.
But there's such a side to it that's informational. And I think that's really what it was supposed to be. That's what it's supposed to be used for. I mean, that's what when it originated in China, that's what a lot of them use it for educational purposes, right? But I didn't know he ended up just blocking me.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Yeah.
such a wealth of knowledge available on TikTok and it's so much education and these different providers and different platforms are really connecting people in a way that we've never seen before. And
Yeah.
especially in the work that I do and so many others do, including yourself, people aren't always willing to come out of the closet, so to speak, to talk about an addiction
Right.
or to talk about substance use or to talk about mental health issues. So I think actually platforms like TikTok kind of provide some anonymity while also providing resource.
Mm.
So I find them to be very important.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about that algorithm that
Mm.
I get DMs a lot saying, I don't know how the hell you got into my For You page because I
Mhm.
don't follow anything about addiction, but I'm a crystal meth addict. So I don't know how you got here.
Mhm.
TikTok knows it's probably listening to you. It was there when
It
you
sure does know. I mean, we do very similar work, so I know how you got on my page,
That's
Dallas, and
right.
why I reached out. But yeah, there is some sense of knowing, even if you've done a search in the past or something, it might point you in the right direction of getting helpful
That's right.
resources.
That's right.
Hmm.
I mean, if you Googled up PNP something or other, then it probably bleeds over to there's a bot somewhere taking that information over to
Like,
TikTok.
oh, you need help, honey. Like, we're gonna put you over here.
Let me
Yeah,
introduce you to Dallas.
yeah, exactly.
Well, Melissa, would you introduce yourself to us, please, since we've been chatting away here?
Yeah, yes. My name is Melissa McCracken. I go by Mel. And I am the executive director at No Matter What Recovery Center in Los Angeles, California. And we are a treatment program.
Mm.
right? So we offer a myriad of treatment episodes, but one of those being sexualized drug use and chemsex. But we also address mental health issues, other substance use disorder issues, and really just provide a full range of treatment resources for individuals that might need help.
And how long have you been helping chemsex addicts recover?
The chemsexuals, as I call them. So
Sexual.
the
I love
chemsexy, yeah.
that.
I have been helping them for almost 10 years, and I have worked in an acute trauma-focused treatment center for the last 8.5 of those 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Acute trauma treatment center. So what is the difference? What makes it an acute trauma treatment center?
Well, I think the acuity that's needed, right? Like the clinical services that are needed, would put someone maybe in like a residential treatment center versus like an outpatient program where someone is going in, 2 or 3 times a week and they're just going in for a couple of groups. Acute treatment really is residential, right? Residential and intensive outpatient. So there's a longevity of stay and there's a consistency of services that may last all day versus, an hour or two a day.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to know, I'm sure, where we are on the spectrum of use, right? Because like people come to me and they some of them get upset when they say I can't help them. I tell them I can't help them, but if you have been using, if you are at that point where you've lost it all, right? You've lost everything, you cannot stop using, you are not ready to be coached by me. You need a
Yeah.
higher level of care in an acute trauma treatment center. The
Yeah.
issue a lot of times is the availability of them. Is that right?
Right. Yes. And specificities. I always say this.
Yeah.
Specific. That's one of those words that ties my tongue up. But the specific of treatment and what you're looking to get out of treatment are so important. And, even with treating someone or helping someone or coaching someone, safety and stabilization is necessary, especially in the beginning phases. And even looking at the continuum of care, like if you're unable to quit using and you're using, once a day, twice a day, or even, every other day, a treatment is a viable option for you because even if you have a therapist or a sober coach, you still need the structure and containment and therapeutic space to help you kind of get to some of the underlying issues, which is why I think trauma is such a big piece of this that keep contributing maybe to relapse cycles or your inability to put something down.
Yeah. 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 I always say quitting meth is sometimes the easy part because then you're faced wide open with the trauma you've been numbing, right? It's
Yeah, detox alone
mm,
is going to address the physical symptom,
mm,
right? Which the withdrawal phase and all of that, but it doesn't address like the psychological, the social and behavioral problems that often are associated with addiction or even, continue to contribute to lapses, right?
mm,
So it's really necessary for us to kind of holistically look at all of the pieces
mm,
that might make a person want to use again.
mm. Could you talk about that holistic view? Like what are the pieces you look at in that case?
So I mean, there's so many different components, but like as a clinician, when I am with a client, like I'm really looking at a biosocial
Mm,
assessment,
mm,
right? Like, what are some of their physiological barriers,
mm,
right? Like, how are their cravings showing up in their body, right? Do they have impulse control? Are they able to ground themselves? Are they able to create a sense of resource and safety when like a craving hits the body, right? And then psychologically, like how is their mind thinking? What are they believing about themselves that may actually undermine the recovery that they're seeking, right? So, belief systems are something that are more in the mind and less in the emotional body. I
mm,
think sometimes I'm going to call them adaptive belief systems, actually protect us from some of the emotional pain
mm.
and, working with the emotional body as well. I think there's so much unaddressed, I'm going to call it heartbreak, right?
Mm.
Heartbreak and hurt that I think needs to be processed not only in a therapeutic container or therapeutic environment, but I find a lot of the power in treatment to actually be in the groups, right? Because that's where we're developing empathy and skills around what it means to actually be intimate with another person. That's where you're able to kind of let go of secrets and find like-minded people who are like, oh, right, me too. And like that whole Me Too is, I think, one of the most powerful aspects about working with a group in treatment, along with individual therapy, of course. But I am a community-centered leader, I suppose, where I know that as a clinician, someone's going to have access to me, 1 hour or 2 hours a week. So I don't want the dependency to be on me specifically.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here to help. And yes, let's talk about adaptive coping skills and all the things, but really that, leaning people more towards the community aspect of like group therapy has some profound state shifts, especially when processing through, whether it's trauma or shame or letting go of stigma. The groups with peers are so important, and that's a part of the treatment process too.
So you've talked about biosocial, you talked about emotional, you talked about
Hmm.
behavioral,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, I
now,
think that's where we left off, right? Really looking at like some of the behaviors that just aren't aligned with me, right? And those behaviors oftentimes look like dishonesty or acting out of integrity or, going outside of my values, whether it's to people please, manipulate, get what I want, whatever it is. Like there are a lot of behaviors that really need to be addressed, and they can be addressed in treatment, specifically around chemsex and abstinence is a period of abstinence is always the recommendation. So when you kind of are able to put your phone on the shelf, you
mm,
put the apps on the shelf,
mm.
right? And
Ding, ding,
that is,
ding.
yeah, right. That isn't readily available in your hands. It's like having a drug in your hands
Yes,
every single day.
that's right.
If you're still on the apps, you're still talking to old using people. Um, and that is really difficult for a person to recover from, methamphetamine abuse, having this digital drug dealer in their hands every day. And so,
Mm,
like, those are some of the behavioral stops and interventions that I think fare better off in treatment. I highly recommend a digital detox for everyone who's a chemsexual out there, because it's not just about, compulsive sex or even substance use. You have this underlying process addiction of a digital device in your hands
mm.
and
Yes.
readily available every single time. So, the interventions are more around behaviors, but the processing is really around, some of the psychological injury, some of the emotional injury, and some of the moral injury, which is
Mm,
something that I'm really leaning towards is like the things that hurt us the most are the things that we've done, actually.
mm. Yeah.
Like other people have hurt us, and I think that type of healing from, heartbreak that, another person may have imposed or hurt or even trauma, we have a roadmap for that type of healing. But when it comes to kind of the moral injury of where I have done things, I have said things, I've not shown up, for my grandma's 80th birthday, like those type of things
Mm,
require therapeutic help to kind of navigate and get through.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. I don't know where to start besides I I, I want to say that if you're thinking about treatment or if you have a friend or family member who you think needs treatment, go back and listen to what Melissa was just saying in terms of what to look for and to look at here. And
Mhm.
it sounds like you used the word heartbreak several times. And
Yeah,
I that really resonates with
yeah,
me. I'm getting chill
yeah.
bumps right now, and I'm having an emotional day anyway because I've been displaced from my home by the hurricane. So
Mhm.
I'm just kind of blah blah blah. But the
Mhm.
heartbreak that I see and that I felt as a chemsexual too,
Mhm.
you know, when
Mhm.
your heart is broken,
Right.
there's no chemical, there's no pill, there's nothing that will fix that. But
Right.
when it is broken, to me, you keep acting out the way it was broken.
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah, there's reenactment that happens all the time, and it's almost trying to like create a different ending to a story of heartbreak.
yes.
So if I get, back into this, maybe I can create a softer landing or, try and like heal or resolve the heartbreak that I originally felt. And you're just reenacting trauma. You're
Yeah.
just repeating a vicious cycle of abuse,
Yeah.
right? In order to try and, put some salve on a heartbreak. And I mean, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I don't know, I think we know how to identify a lot of other things. But like when I speak to the heartbreak that comes from being a person in addiction, the the internalized sense of like, oh, I'm disappointing friends or family. I am disappointing myself. Um, I can't keep a job. Is there something wrong with me? There's all these ideas that stem from this origin of heartbreak. And we can see a broken arm. We know what to do with a broken arm. Oh, all right, you cry for help, you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they wrap it up, they tell you 6 weeks. All right, great. This is a physical, tangible injury. But I think so many people in this world, especially those who struggle with addiction and trauma and mental health issues, you can't see it, which makes it even more pervasive because we want to be able to see an injury. But this is one of those injuries that can't be seen. It can be talked about, a story can be told. Um, but I think in a recovery space, in a community space, it's actually held with supportive hands and with other people who carry the same injury. Um, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And these heartbreaks, they're so subtle in our lives. I think that you could be 5 years old and you needed mommy, but mommy said she's too busy for you or whatever,
Right.
and that's a
Right.
heartbreak. I'm a bother.
Yeah.
Why are you always
Mhm.
crying? Why did I have
Mhm.
kids or something like that? That
Mhm.
30-second snippet can
Mhm.
be your heartbreak. And then you
Right.
start believing that I'm a bother, I'm
Right.
a burden.
Right. And then we're walking around, all just 8-year-olds living from that lens
Yep.
of all of these tiny heartbreaks, these
Yeah.
little micro earthquakes. And uh, you know, yes, there's big trauma, right? Big T trauma is what I
Yeah.
call them.
Yeah.
Like violence, assaults, those are all very big T event generated trauma. Like there was a big event, and then there's, these are the symptoms of being a traumatized person after a big event. But symptoms look much different for someone who has had a complexity around little traumas, right around those little moments, because we are formed and shaped as humans in these little moments. And then we have belief systems as a result of
Mhm.
neglect or a lack of emotional support or whatever that is. But like we begin to form these ideas about who we are and who people in the world are as well.
That's right.
And if I'm always told that, oh, not now, I'm too busy, not now, I'm too busy, guess what? As an adult, like I still have this idea from being a 6-year-old and being told that there wasn't space for me, that I'm a bother, that I'm a burden.
Yep.
And so that person is probably going to have a lot of difficulty when it comes to asking for help because they have this idea that there's not help available because when they have asked, they have been rejected or just left alone.
Mhm.
So it's all of these little T's that really start to formulate big belief systems about who we think we are and what's available to us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good. It's so good because I have so many chemsexuals. I'm gonna start saying chemsexuals now. Chemsexuals say I use because I'm horny.
Mhm.
that's not it. Like it's not the sex, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
You feel like you're a bother, and guess what? You're going to get into relationships with people who make you feel like a bother,
That's right.
you know? And you're going to view the whole world that way, and you're going to interpret every aspect of your life, with it work and
Mhm.
friendships, every family, as I'm
Mhm.
a bother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that the way out of that, the only thing you know to do, and this is all subconscious much many times, right?
Right.
Is you found a miracle substance
Hmm.
that makes you feel like a part of something and you're not a bother anymore. Because you can
Hmm.
do and say and be anything you want. It's like a free little ticket, but of
Hmm.
course it comes with the price.
Oh, yeah, very high price. And, in having the privilege of probably working with, thousands, uh, mostly men, but many genders, in the last 10 years, the one thing that I have deduced from all of this, and also being a person in recovery, is that people are just looking for a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusivity, where it doesn't matter what I look like, it doesn't matter what my status is, it doesn't matter, how thick or thin or tall or short or all of that goes away for a second. And I'm actually in a space of feeling included.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of us, especially queer folks, very queer, um, have this idea that I don't belong, or that I'm always excluded, or that I'm bothering someone or something just because I have a very basic need. To find a place where there is open-ended acceptance, a lot of folks are willing to sacrifice their sobriety, their lives, and their connections in sobriety for just a moment or just a sense of what it's like to belong, even if that's for a second.
Yeah.
And there's, we start to sacrifice our integrity as humans for just a sense of belonging or connection, where maybe symptoms of trauma don't exist for a moment. Maybe my shame is gone for a moment. Maybe stigma around who I am as a sexual being is gone for a moment. The flooding of externalized oppression or even some of the lateral violence within the community towards one another, right? We're a bit unhealed when it comes to that. And I wish we would talk to each other a little bit softer in the way that we speak. Um, when you're using meth, it eradicates that emotional consciousness, right? So whether it's trauma, whether it's mental health, whether it's shame-based belief systems, or the senses of fear, all of these things, sex is the last on the list.
Mhm.
Like people have this idea that, oh, I'm just horny. Oh, I just want to go use because, I want to get off or whatever that is. And I would really invite, anyone who's listening to really do a reappraisal of that idea,
Yeah.
right? And what it means. Because, I would say 9 out of 10 times, it's usually you're just looking for a place to belong or to feel included and to not have to carry the burden of unresolved trauma into your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes, thank you. And you are the expert. So I'm so glad and happy and grateful that you just said that.
I
Um,
would say I'm a really good listener. I hear you say that, and I say thank you very much. And I say that, along with my own experience, school doesn't teach you much about this, Dallas,
mm, mm, mm,
but being a good listener
mm.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Thank you. So let me ask you about relapse. Um,
mm,
This drug, from what I can tell, and we have a common friend, Dr. Fawcett. I
we
saw
do.
him. I saw him commenting on your page on Facebook. Um, but some of the figures that I saw from him that he presented once was about the fact that getting sober from crystal meth, it statistically you relapse more than you will with other substances.
Mhm.
And so how do you counsel people who are just relapsed, like chemsexuals? Like what are some pointers you have that we can maybe get away from the crushing shame of it and maybe leverage the experience? Do you work with people in that way?
Oh yeah, I mean, for chemsex, it's one of the highest relapse rates in the country,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And there are a ton of reasons that go behind that, and I really think that it is the fusion of meth and sex,
Yeah.
right? Because just like, sex is like food, like for most of us,
Yeah.
unless you're in the asexual camp, yay, my asexuals, but we need that. We need to feel desire. We need to feel attraction. And around relapse, I see people just enter that process too soon of going right back into sex, right? So, you know, I ask people this question, and I think there's one question I find a little overused, right? Which is what are you going to do differently this time? And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm sure there are behavioral changes that maybe you weren't willing to make, and now another relapse has brought you here, and you can do that. But I want to know more like, how are you going to be different in the world?
Mm,
What were you not aligned with that was in truth and authenticity?
mm,
Subjective to you and your experience. We all have a different set of morals and values and all these things. But the minute someone steps out of their alignment with those is when I see them relapse. And I'll see them relapse again and again because they become dishonest, or they're acting out of integrity, or they are living in the shame of secrecy, like all of these things that might not actually be aligned with the truth of who they are.
mm,
And recovery is a process of recovering.
mm,
And I really think we are recovering like the truth of who we are and our very essence in this journey.
mm.
So, what do I say to them? How are you going to be different in the world? Not what are you going to do different, because we can do
Right.
all the things till the cows come home. But how do you want to orient yourself towards a life that's living in recovery? What are your hopes? And these are all casualties of addiction. You lose sight of your hopes, your
Mm,
dreams, visions, your ideas, your wants, and, eventually just who you are.
mm,
So it's like bringing back in those things and really using like some motivational interviewing, I find to be very important in helping people orient their life towards truth, the truth
mm.
of who they are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Recovery is really, like you said, it's a journey back to self,
Yeah,
right?
it really is.
The
Yeah,
self of who you were before all the trauma.
that's right. Before all the slings and arrows of life kind of hit you, right? And we all have, I call it mud on the windshield, right? Which is there are, we come into this life whole view looking through an open windshield. And then, like you were saying, boom, we're like 5 or 6 years old
Yeah.
and we reach out for help and someone doesn't have time for us. So there's a little bit of mud on the windshield, right?
Yeah.
And then there's all these other,
Mm,
slings and arrows that create a barrier between us and thinking and seeing clearly. Like sobriety itself just translates in its rarest form to clarity.
mm,
That's what it is. So it's like, how can we wipe some of that mud off the windshield so we have a clear view and a clear picture of who we are in the world
mm,
and who we want to be? Like, I'm all about like, not, what do you want right now? I'm asking bigger questions to my clients. Why are you on the planet?
mm,
What are your gifts? What are your talents? Like, what are you here for? Right?
mm,
I mean, my mission statement is to live my life to the best of my ability through the lens of love.
mm.
That doesn't mean that I'm all woo woo and like, soft and fuzzy all the time. Sometimes love is a hard no
Yeah.
and a big yes.
Mm,
So, really getting folks who struggled with relapse time and time again in touch with a life orientation that reflects and resembles who they are
mm,
as a sober person,
mm.
they're heading towards something different. They're
Yeah.
not doing something different. They've taken a 2-degree shift towards something different.
Yes. Yes. Whew. Um,
Big
what,
question here.
yeah. Well, what if I said to you, well, I don't know who I am. How do I live in integrity with who I am when I don't know who I am?
Mhm. I love this question. This is let's find out
Mm,
is my response to that.
mm,
Let's find out what brings you joy, what ignites your playfulness. Like this
mm.
is big opportunity, right? So much possibility. And by the way, as a clinician, the clients that come to me and say, I don't know, oh, thank God. Because I get so many that just know so much. And I'm just like, hold on. Price of admission here. The price of admission in this. You got to give up everything you think you know.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
if you coming in and you're saying, I don't know,
Mm,
great.
yeah,
You're already 25% in,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
let's find out. Let's do an exploration. Like, let's see what types of food you like. Maybe your taste in, a partner has changed. Like,
Mm,
there's such opportunity on the horizon from a place of I don't know who I am.
yeah.
And I also think that I go in with the assumption that everyone kind of has a core sense of their own being, right? And this is a big assumption I make, and I will continue to make this assumption. But there are certain behaviors that don't resonate with that, right? And whether that's using substances to avoid, to cope, to numb out, um, in the reflection, we find the direction.
Mm,
And so if I can pin it all the way back down to just two things that I value about myself, like what do I stand for?
mm,
Okay, well, I stand for human rights.
mm.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that important to you?
Mm,
Finding meaning. Um, I think about Man's Search for Meaning, a book that was written by Viktor Frankl, who was a psychologist who was actually imprisoned in Nazi Germany and went to a concentration camp. He was stripped of everything, all of it. And I'm not just talking about tangible things, I'm talking about his humanity.
mm,
And so he started documenting his journey. And at the end of the day, he was released. And he said that the most important thing that we can do is to make meaning out of our suffering.
mm.
And we have all suffered. That's a human condition if you're on this planet.
Yeah,
And where do you make meaning? How do you spin that into gold?
yeah.
That's the lamplighter. That's the way.
Mm, mm, mm,
So I like finding out what's meaningful to people, finding out, why they value certain things.
mm.
I think that will begin to kind of unlock who a person is
Yeah,
or reveal that to themselves after addiction.
yeah, yeah. Yes, yes. Wow. And that's so important to it, it's a perspective shift. Like all of this to me, spiritual
Mhm,
growth, emotional growth, mental growth, growth out of recovery is one perspective shift after another. And if you
yeah.
can shift that perspective of this suffering was for a reason, right?
Mhm,
This
mhm,
suffering was a crucible for me to
mhm,
get to a higher place, and so what can I now dig out of this,
mhm,
instead of so focused on I know there's a lot of shame and a lot of trauma about what you did, and I, for me as a father, I burned down the lives of two innocent children who
mhm,
never asked for it.
mhm.
I drug them down with me.
Yeah,
And I could still be focused on that. I could still
sure.
be in that circle of shame. But I see
Mhm,
now we went through that actually together to
mhm,
get to where we are now at the highest level of relationship I think a parent and children could be right at this moment.
mhm, mhm.
because we went through it. And
Yeah,
so I just it's so important, like you're saying, to spend gold out of this. And because if
yeah,
if you can shift that way to ask, how can this have been the best thing that's happened to me? What can be the
right.
best part of it? And I'm willing to see it differently. That can really
You got to be willing.
catapult you. Yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what do I want to give my attention to? Because I think one of the most valuable things that we possess as humans is where I put my attention.
Mm.
That is what separates me from any other species on the planet. I
Yeah.
have voluntary direction, meaning I can put my attention
Mhm.
over here to my grandma's bed box, so it's in my kitchen, or over here to these tulips on I have the ability to shift my attention.
Mhm.
And I can either replay and recirculate the same thing over and over and over again about like the destruction of my addiction or the devastation. And yes, there's a period of time for processing all that I think is really important. But you also have access to choice when you're a sober person. So that means I get to choose where I want my energy to flow,
Yeah.
right? And these kind of I think these work hand in hand, which is I need to process through some of the pain or whether harm has been done to me or I've created harm and caused harm as a result of being a person in active addiction. Yes, but there comes a point where you're able to kind of go in there and grab like the little nuggets that might lend to a gift or a talent
Mhm.
that is yet unrevealed to you if you would just take your attention away for 1 second from the pain of it
Yeah.
and look out, how can this be useful to others? How can this be useful to me? What is it I need to know about myself to put in an intervention from me walking out the door next time? I
Mhm.
think that there's just so much available in that willingness, you had the right word,
Mhm.
to shift my perspective
Yeah.
just for a second
Yeah.
instead of staring at the same old shadows on the wall.
Yeah.
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 You know the allegory of the cave, right? Where they have it's a so it's a play that was allegory of the cave. And it's pretty much about coming back into the light again. And all these people, they think they're chained inside of this cave and they're watching these shadows dance on the wall and they're all mesmerized by the shadows, right? And they were told that they are chained to the cave and they can never leave the cave. And the cave leader is the one who can name all the shadows on the wall. Oh, this is that time where, I was forgotten at school, or this is that person who was bullied me through high school. It was really mean, like, and can spot all the shadows on the wall. And then there's one person who realizes you can get up and you can walk out of the cave,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And they go and they're like, oh my God, I'm not chained. Okay. So they make a decision to stop watching the shadows dance on the wall because they never change
Mhm.
and to walk out of the cave.
Wow.
And they walk out of the cave and they're immediately blinded. And this is much like recovery
Mm.
because their eyes have not seen the sunlight
Right.
in years.
Yeah.
So once their eyes adjust,
Mhm.
something new comes into focus.
Mhm.
Something different arrives in their eyesight,
Mhm.
and they see a different world.
Mhm.
And so they run back into the cave and they're trying to tell everyone, we are not chained, y'all. I don't know who sold us this lie, but y'all got to go just right up the hill.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Yeah.
Everything is just right on the other side of getting out of here.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks will choose to stay in the cave.
Yeah.
And many of them in the allegory
Mhm.
and not be let out into a place of light because they are so
Yeah.
used to the certainty of the shadows dancing on the wall and what they mean
Yeah.
that they are unwilling to even look down at their feet, see they're not chained,
Mhm.
and unwilling to walk out.
Yeah.
So recovery will blind you at first.
Oh
That
yeah.
new it will blind you at first.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. Wow.
sunlight of the spirit might burn your skin if you ain't got your sunscreen on. So, but really, it, there it it provides a lot of comfort for many people, and I acknowledge that, myself being
Right.
included.
Yeah.
It's you know the horrors and the terrors that have, plagued others, plagued myself, in life. It's easier to know that than to walk out of the cave.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. There's a newsletter that I put out asking, are you addicted to being addicted?
Yeah,
Are you comfortable with the chaos?
that's right.
Are you attached to a role that gets you attention? Like always being on that, I'm going to relapse. I'm going to relapse. I'm triggered. I'm triggered, because it gives you the attention and the validation and the notoriety, the noticeableness that you
Yeah,
need, right?
right.
There's a lot of questions there. And
Yeah.
you can't, how do you move forward if you don't know where you're going? Also, in
Hmm.
terms, like you said, imagining, envisioning who I'm going to show up as a sober person. It
Hmm.
gives your subconscious a flash of, oh, this is better.
Hmm.
This is
Yeah.
better. This could be a better life. Um,
Hmm.
and so that just came up for me in terms of what you were saying about this cave, in that we get so just comfortable with it, and sometimes we get sober for a while and life becomes quote unquote boring, and we miss that. We miss watching the shadows, we miss the chaos, we miss the all the stuff
Hmm.
we had, right?
Hmm.
The other part of that too is that a lot of guys, when they start getting sober and they see a better life, they think of all the friends that the friendships they made, the user friends, and they want to go back and help them.
Mm. Yeah, that's yeah, I get that a lot. Oh, I'm just contacting this guy who's using in the name of service.
I know.
Come on. No, you're
I want
not.
him, but the relationships that you form as two chemsexuals together
Hmm.
seem so strong.
They do.
You cut right through, hey, how you doing? To let's get naked and talk about the most vulnerable parts of my life, which is I like to, lick armpits and I like this and this, you go
Hmm.
right into that.
Hmm.
I know for me, the icebreaker used to be, we're going to shower together first.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
icebreaker here.
Yeah.
But so you do form a bond, whether it be a real bond or a fake bond.
Right.
But well, I want to bring this up in terms of I know you care about them and I know you want them to be happy too.
Hmm.
But when you go back in that cave, you risk being mesmerized by those shadows again and
100%.
miss that life and you won't come back out.
That's right. Yeah. You're lucky if you make it out, especially with drugs these days and the differences.
That's right.
And I always, make this suggestion. If there's someone that you're concerned about, and you did listen, we do create bonds, whether they're counterfeit, whether they're real. I mean, there's still a bond there. There's still an emotional bond, and there's still like a mental memory of the bond. Um, if that's really what you're up to, give them your sponsor's number.
Yeah.
Give them somebody else's number in the recovery community who maybe has a little bit more time than you, and
Mhm.
who, if you're fresh out of the cave, it's going to be really inviting to go right back in as soon
Yeah.
as like we get a little bit of a sunburn or your eyes start to hurt.
Mhm.
Yes, but pass that along. If you're truly there for service and care of another human being, and I got 30 days, and I know someone in my home group has 5 years, then I'm gonna go with the person who has 5 years. And I can take that off me, and I don't have to be the person with 30 days that not only risks my sobriety, but might put another person in harm's way as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think there are ways to work with that and to honor and validate that, like, yeah, these are really intense bonds that feel very real. They may not be true, but they feel real.
Yes.
And I want to like definitely like acknowledge like the realness in that. And also I can know that I'm not the person.
That's right. And That's that self-love no, right?
That's right. Yep.
That
Yep.
is that boundary that
Mhm.
I need to do a whole podcast on boundaries.
Yeah. And I mean, I always frame boundaries as just they're not for you, they're for me, and they're my limitations,
Right.
right? And I think part of loving ourselves is to learn our own limitations
Yeah.
and what I am capable of doing and what I'm not capable of doing, and not pushing myself in any extreme in any direction, and keeping my sense of integrity looks like acknowledging boundaries and limitations,
Right.
especially when it comes to involving other people.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I get that lion heart of a person in their first 6 months who's just like, I want to help everybody. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
I know.
yes, put
I
them
know.
here up because it's your time now.
That's right.
There will be time for all of this and pass that on. But
Yeah.
right now, this is time for you.
Yeah.
You're
That's
the person who needs your help the most in the beginning stages.
that's right. That's
Mhm.
right. Healthy selfishness is
Mhm.
required here. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some of these people pleasing tendencies
Hmm.
of I don't want to make them mad. Like in the beginning, I have some clients who don't want to, and I say block your users if it makes you feel better. Do it. It's a temporary block.
Hmm.
Temporary block if that makes you feel better, right?
Hmm.
They're afraid of them being mad at them,
Yeah.
and I'm like, your life is at stake here.
Right.
Whether or not they're mad at you is
Hmm.
inconsequential. Like you,
Yeah.
it's okay if they're mad, right?
Right.
Right? It's okay.
And it's not mine to manage if they're mad. And like even with this, I think about like a lot of the work that ACA does, adult children of alcoholics.
Mm,
And there's a lot of people pleasing that comes up from children who are from dysfunctional families or families rooted in alcoholism or addiction. And one of those things is not wanting to make someone mad, or people pleasing, sacrificing my identity, to care more for someone else. And it's really rooted a lot of times in childhood trauma
yes.
because we were reliant on our caregivers, right? So if my caregiver, likes the sheets folded in a certain way and I get in trouble every time they're not, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep this on schedule. I'm going to fold the sheets exactly like you want them. I'm going to continue to sacrifice my own integrity and my own identity and my own authenticity because I'm reliant and dependent on you as a caregiver. And it becomes a survival state. It becomes a fight or flight response. That people pleasing,
Mm,
it's such a small word to describe what it's like to grow up in a situation where you are reliant on a caregiver that requires so much from you all the time.
yep.
And there's no space or room for actually who you are because you're so busy on just trying to not get disconnected
Yep.
because your survival is threatened.
Yeah.
So it's like if someone were mad at you, maybe you got beat. Maybe there was, assault,
Yeah.
bullying, anything like that. So you would be willing to do anything that you can to
Hmm.
not make people mad at you to protect your safety.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
have a real softness around that,
Yeah.
right? And it's also like this is how trauma unfolds.
Yeah.
Because trauma is not something about what happened then.
Yeah.
It's about still living in it now
It's right.
and what's happening right now.
It's
And if
right.
I'm heavily engaged in people pleasing processes that forsake who I am, then I'm going to bank on, say, 98% of the time, it's rooted in trauma
Hmm.
and the threat of survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where and a lot of us queer people know this firsthand because being queer was what it was folding the sheet wrong, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who I am person is
Right.
the wrongful
Who I
thing. Yeah.
essentially am at my core is wrong, right?
Right. Right.
So we have to
Yeah.
split into two,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we start hating that part of ourselves that's queer.
Yeah.
And that is
It
so,
becomes a whole separate identity.
that's right, right. And that internalized
Yeah.
homophobia is so huge in the chemsex world too.
Yeah, it sure is. And, I always ask this question because this can kind of root it out, so to speak, is when did you first discover your differentness?
Mm,
How old were you when you first consciously knew that you were different? Because from that point on, oftentimes people spend a lifetime
yeah,
trying to disguise their differentness.
that's right.
And so all of the protective systems that come around that, whether it's people pleasing, whether it's addiction, whether, it's overcompensation or, overachieving, all of these are coping skills and protector parts that originally stem from the first time someone may have noticed that they're a little bit different.
Yeah.
So you start to disguise yourself, and all of these disguises, going back to the mud on the windshield.
Hmm.
This is the mud on the windshield.
Hmm.
It's how I've disguised my differentness,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
not being allowed to
The
be
mud on
me.
the windshield is equivalent to what I say, which is, you're this perfect light when you come into the world, right?
Hmm.
Like the Buddhists call it an obscuration.
Hmm.
And I call it like I kind of act like I say you have this light, like a light bulb. Those comments and those that conditioning that we go through is like stringing having a string wrapped around the light bulb. It's every time it's obscuring your light just a little more. Same
Yeah.
thing with the mud on the windshield, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's all those things start wrapping around, and all of a sudden, who you are is hidden because
Yeah.
who even who you think your identity is really an illusion a lot of times because you've allowed your identity to be written by the outside world.
That's right. Yeah. Other people.
Yeah.
And we sacrifice that and have to in so many places and spaces just for basics of human survival.
Yes.
And I mean, eventually, I'm thinking about a string and a light bulb. Eventually, that's going to get hot and it's going to burn up or it's going to explode. So, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter
Yeah.
until when someone comes in and says, I don't know who I am
Yeah.
because I've spent a lifetime living for other people.
Yes.
Yeah. And being forced to live for other people.
Yes. For
Yeah.
survival. Right.
That's right.
As we said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the work.
Hmm. That is the
That's the
work.
work in
Yeah.
recovery. And
Hmm.
let me tell you, it's 6 years for me now, and I'm just now in a relationship.
Hmm.
And I feel like I'm brand new in recovery because it's bringing up all the new stuff. You know, this guy, he's half my age, okay? You would
Hmm.
never guess because I'm the one that's like, because he was saying to me, I can't see you this weekend. He has boundaries. He's healthy. He know, he's prioritizing things.
Right.
But to
Yeah.
me, a stab, in the heart.
Right.
Because, like you said, the nervous system does not understand linear time. It understands emotion.
That's
So the emotion of hearing him say, I don't have time for you.
right.
Sorry. Ooh.
Let me ask you this question.
Okay.
Did he say I don't have time for you?
He didn't. That's what I heard.
Goes right in.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
And it took me right back to a situation from my earlier, in my childhood
Yeah.
of, you know what I mean? And so rejection and all that stuff. And I had to go. I have these woods where I go and I talk to the trees and they help me, and so I'm
Hmm.
out there screaming and crying and holding on to this tree while people are running by because I'm saying, I'm willing to see this differently. I'm willing to see this differently. And it came to me, the whole thing came to me about what was really happening.
Mm.
And and what I'm saying all this is the work isn't ever done either.
Yeah.
It- but
No.
it's so beautiful on the other end.
Hmm.
The stuff this kid has brought, and I say kid, but it has brought
Hmm.
up for me has just
Yeah.
has made so much more space
Yeah,
for more just good, rich love for myself and
right.
and more space for my clients, more space for the world.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the difference is, like you were saying earlier, is going back to heal that while moving forward is everything we do is infused with the consciousness we do it in. And so when you go back to heal, if you approach it with curiosity instead of condemnation, it takes on
Right.
a whole different flavor, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of overly personalizing something or berating myself or belittling myself. Even in this example, I mean, you want to find out who you are, get into a relationship. That's what I always tell you.
Oh my
Like,
God.
man, like, highly, like, spend time with yourself and get to know you before we bring another person in. But, like, really, you will find out what needs your attention.
Oh my
You will
God.
find the places and spaces that need your healing,
Yeah.
right? And you have to have the capacity to be able to even withstand your own curiosity about that and not give in to like these old ideas too quickly. And I think this is kind of why I say overall we, because it's like in the rooms and treatment, like, yeah, don't get into a relationship in your first year. Grow your capacity to be curious, like we're
Yeah.
saying. And then after that, like you can approach these situations with curiosity
Yeah.
as opposed to, like you said, condemnation, right? Like I'm condemning this person, I'm condemning myself, or because you got to work on kind of healing those faulty core belief systems, healing trauma
Yeah.
that may actually interrupt your ability to interpret sensory data,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
him saying, hey, I have a lot of stuff to do, would love to see you, but I'm not going to be able to. And Dallas receives it as like,
I
not
don't
making
like
time
you.
for me. Like I get it. Listen, I don't gotta go into my personal experience with that, but I have interpreted many things. Like someone tells
Yeah.
me to take the trash out, and I'm like, oh, you think I'm a slob?
Oh.
Like, yeah, exactly. And then I'm ready to fight. But
Right.
there's no fight. It's literally
Yeah.
like you just asked me for a need to be met.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, giving space and time for
Yeah.
those things, doing some work
Yeah.
on yourself, letting it settle, and then healthy relationships that are satisfactory and fulfilling and kind and gentle, those are on the other side of that.
That's
But
right.
if I'm coming from the defensiveness of unresolved trauma,
Mhm.
this is going to be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And for those that are in a relationship, I mean, you get to know your partner or partners again too, in a much different way.
Mm.
And I think, family counseling and guidance around that because a person is so raw
Yeah.
when they are coming out of active addiction that everything is going to sting and everything is going to hurt and everything is going to be sharp. And sometimes a period of distance is a recommendation
Yeah.
because we need time to heal in the same way that broken arm needs 6 weeks
Yeah.
and you may need longer depending on how it's healing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I never really got the whole wait a year thing. I say you might want to wait longer, depending, but yeah, it just opens up a relationship just opens up so much more, and thank God that I first took care of a lot, but two, that I found someone who the patience, the spaciousness, the acceptance this man has,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I could tell him, I'll say, you're talking to my 4-year-old right now, but because you won't see me this weekend, I am so hurt, like,
Yeah.
I was having a tantrum. I was
Of
having
course.
a tantrum, and he just sits back, okay. Okay, whatever. And then, then I come back and say, okay, the trees took it back. The trees helped me. I'm fine. But
Yeah.
having somebody who has the patience for that too is that takes a while to find, I think.
It does, and that's a slow walk into that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And having, you may be a curious person and inviting someone else into a space of curiosity can be incredibly intimate,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, yeah, I'm trying to understand me more. I'm trying to understand you more. And then there's the we more, right? Like, how can we understand each other
Yeah.
differently?
Yeah.
Even like having awareness to say, oh, you were talking to my 3-year-old, like that's a lot of insight and awareness. It takes a lot to get there.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it feels like I'm in my adult body when I'm saying that, you know? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I get
Yes.
it.
Yes. And one thing I say in my content a lot too, and to my clients is you think that the boss that triggers you as a 45-year-old is
Mhm.
about him.
Mm-mm.
It's not.
No,
It's never about him. It's
no.
about something else before. It's the same emotion,
Mhm.
probably as a, between 0 and 7, but
Mhm.
probably as a 6-year-old, there's something about that that's connected.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
reminding you.
right. And that's such a big clue to recovery. Who
Mhm.
in your life is your biggest trigger? What in your life is your biggest emotional trigger? You know?
That's your greatest teacher right there, Dallas.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, that is the one. That is the sage. That is the mentor. Like, let that
Yep.
be. Like,
Yep.
listen, never miss a good triggers opportunity.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't want to waste that because, Sally who comes in my workplace and, speaks to me in a tone that reminds me of my mom. Oh
Yep.
man, she triggers me.
Yeah.
Let me investigate this,
Uh,
right? This is the invitation,
yeah.
right? Just in the same way, pain is the invitation.
Yep.
Every trigger is an invitation to a higher way of being.
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah. 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 Wow. I think this has been my favorite podcast so far.
I have so enjoyed talking to you, Dallas. I'm so glad. Listen, y'all, I never reach out to people on TikTok, and then I came across Dallas's posts, and it really resonated with me in a deep way. So here we are. This is one action of someone reaching out to another who is in the same field and finds meaning in the same thing. So I'm really glad we got to do this.
Me too. This has been amazing. And I feel
Yeah,
like this is going to help a lot of people,
I
even
really
more
hope
than
so.
already helped already. So I
Well,
appreciate,
likewise.
I appreciate
Yeah.
you, and I really hope we can do this again too.
Yeah, please,
I would
let's.
love to. Yeah,
All right.
we love
Well,
to.
reach
So
out if you need anything. I'm here for it.
I will. And if there's any contact information that you want us to put in the show notes, if there are people who, if they reach out to you, please give me that. Otherwise, guys, I hope that you will listen to this episode more than once. Take notes.
Mhm.
There will be a
Mhm.
study. There will be a study guide always with my podcast that will be available
Beautiful.
as well. So, in that being said, I will see you all next week.